Hi guys, welcome back to CKLA lessons. Today we are working on lesson 3. So I've got my bookmark over here. Lesson 3 starts on page 68. The first page of that lesson is on page 68. But we're going to reread the first chapter, the first vignette. Okay, see it says reading, vignette 1, the house on Mango Street. So maybe it's been a few days since you read that one. Maybe you don't remember it very well. Maybe you do, but we are reading for details today. So we're going to reread that section and then continue with these pages. Okay, so you can find that in two places. Remember, all the vignettes are here in the beginning, or it's on lesson 1, but it's easier to go to page 2. Okay, so vignette 1, the house on Mango Street. So remember your options for reading these vignettes. You can fast forward this video until I'm done reading it and read it by yourself. Read it independently. You could do that out loud or in your head. Or you can listen to me read it as you track the words. Okay, you can't just like keep this video playing and hear me reading it. You have to be looking at the words I'm reading also. Okay, I usually in my class, I'll call you out if I see you looking around the room while I'm reading, okay? It's your job, if I'm reading it, to be tracking. All right, here we go. Vignette 1, the house on Mango Street. We didn't always live on Mango Street. Before that, we lived on Loomis on the 3rd floor. And before that, we lived on Keeler. Before Keeler, it was Paulina. And before that, I can't remember. But what I remember most is moving a lot. Each time it seemed there'd be one more of us. By the time we got to Mango Street, we were 6. Mama, Papa, Carlos, Kiki, my sister Nini, and me. The house on Mango Street is ours, and we don't have to pay rent to anybody or share the yard with the people downstairs, or be careful not to make too much noise, and there isn't a landlord banging on the ceiling with a broom. But even so, it's not the house we'd thought we'd get. We had to leave the flat on Loomis quick. The water pipes broke and the landlord wouldn't fix them because the house was too old. We had to leave fast. We were using the washroom next door and carrying water over in empty milk gallons. That's why Mama and Papa looked for a house, and that's why we moved into the house on Mango Street, far away on the other side of town. They always told us that one day we would move into a house. A real house that would be ours for always, so we wouldn't have to move each year. And our house would have running water and pipes that worked. And inside it would have real stairs, not hallway stairs, but stairs inside like the houses on TV. And we'd have a basement and at least 3 washrooms, so when we took a bath we wouldn't have to tell everybody. Our house would be white with trees around it, and a great big yard and grass growing without a fence. This was the house Papa talked about when he held a lottery ticket, and this was the house Mama dreamed up in the story she told us before she went to bed. But the house on Mango Street is not the way they told it at all. It's small and red, with tight steps in front, and windows so small you'd think they were holding their breath. Bricks are crumbling in places, and the front door is so swollen you have to push hard to get in. There is no front yard, only 4 little elms the city planted by the curb. Out back is a small garage for the car we don't own yet, and a small yard that looks smaller between the 2 buildings on either side. There are stairs in our house, but they are ordinary hallway stairs, and the house only has 1 washroom. Everybody has to share a bedroom. Mama and Papa, Carlos and Kiki, me and Nenny. Once when we were living on Loomis, a nun from my school passed by and saw me playing out front. The laundromat downstairs had been boarded up because it had been robbed 2 days before, and the owner had painted on the wood, "Yes, we're open," so as not to lose business. "Where do you live?" she asked. "There," I said, pointing up to the 3rd floor. "You live there?" "There." I had to look where she pointed. The 3rd floor. The paint-peeling wooden bars Papa had nailed on the windows so we wouldn't fall out. You live there? The way she said it made me feel like nothing. There. I lived there. I nodded. I knew then I had to have a house, a real house, one I could point to. But this isn't it. The house on Mango Street isn't it. For the time being, Mama says. Temporary, Papa says. But I know how those things go. Okay, so that was vignette 1. If we go back to our lesson 3, which was on, what was it, 68? Yeah, 68. Okay, so now back on lesson 3, the first activity page for lesson 3. We have a question about that reading, that first chapter. Okay, who are the characters in this scene? Okay, so I'm just gonna like flip back and forth. Okay, so remember it's on pages like 2 through 5, so I'm just flipping back and forth so I can remember everyone. So first character is the narrator, right? Narrator. And at this point, when we read vignette 1, we didn't know her name, but in the second vignette, we learned that her name was Esperanza. Okay, so there's a narrator, and then there's, she calls them Mama and Papa. If you watched my math video from today, I think it was lesson 34, session 1 maybe? My pen started dying, so I forgot about that. That one's running out of ink. So narrator, she calls her mom Mama, she calls her dad Papa, and then her siblings, Carlos, Kiki, and Nene, or Nini, I don't know how to say that. Carlos, Kiki, Nene. And then there's one more. Okay, she talks about this unfortunate incident here on page 5, the nun from her school. Okay, where the nun is kind of judging her Loomis Street flat, her apartment. So, nun from school. Okay, so those are all our characters. Done with that page. Okay, on this page we have a lot of instructions. So there's a couple different things we're doing. So underline the dialogue in the paragraphs below. And we know that dialogue means when characters are talking. So when something is being said out loud. So anything characters say, we are going to underline. Once when we were living on Loomis, a nun from my school passed by and saw me playing out front. The laundromat downstairs had been boarded up because it had been robbed 2 days before, and the owner had painted on the wood, "Yes, we're open," so as not to lose business. "Where do you live?" she asked. Okay, so there's our first bit of dialogue. Where do you live? But not the she asked part, right? That's the tag. That's who is doing the talking. Really, remember there should be quotation marks here. It was just the author's choice not to include those, but we should. "There," I said, pointing up to the 3rd floor. So the nun asked, "Where do you live?" And she said, "There," pointing up to her house. So Esperanza, the narrator, just said there. "You live there?" Okay, so that's what the nun replied with. And then the rest of this. So there, I had to look at where she pointed. The 3rd floor. The paint peeling, wooden bars Papa had nailed on the windows so we wouldn't fall out. "You live there?" And I don't think the nun is asking again. I think the narrator is just like saying that internally because it's the exact same. Like the nun's not continually asking her like, "You live there, you live there, you live there." I think she's just repeating it. The narrator. The way she said it made me feel like nothing. There. I lived there. I nodded. Okay, so I think that's all the dialogue, just those 3 lines. Okay? Number 3, at the bottom. Now go back and underline in a different color any action in the scene anything that's carried out by Esperanza or the nun. So anything they're doing, any actions. So different color. So once when we were living on Loomis, a nun from my school passed by and saw me playing out front. So just the actions, I'll try and underline as little as possible. I don't want to do like the whole sentence. So passed by and saw me playing. Laundromat, so like the laundry place downstairs, had been boarded up. I feel like that's an action. It had been boarded up. Kind of indirect, but had been boarded up because it had been robbed. It's an action. It was robbed. The owner painted on the wood. Yes, we're open so as not to lose business. Where do you live? She asked. So asking is an action. There, I said, pointing up to the 3rd floor. You live there? There. I had to look where she pointed. So looking is an action. She pointed is an action. The 3rd floor, the paint peeling. Peeling, I guess paint peeling is an action, but it's technically not something carried out by Esperanza or the nun. So I guess I shouldn't have underlined these things about the laundromat either, but oh well. Wooden bars Papa had nailed on the windows so we wouldn't fall out. I'm gonna do some of this anyway. They're actions. Wooden bars Papa had nailed on the windows so we wouldn't fall out. Falling out would have been an action, so it's good that Papa nailed them up. You live there. The way she said it made me feel, feeling's an action, like nothing. There. I lived there. I nodded. Okay. Lots of actions being done. Okay. So, this is the important section for this lesson. Okay. So remember this for a second. This next part, this page right here, 70, and next to it, 71, is something we would have done if we were in class. So if you've got siblings, or if your parents want to do this with you, or anything like that, you can still go through and do this activity. Okay, so you can read through these pages, figure out what you're supposed to do. It's an acting thing, so I know in my class, a lot of times, well, I personally wouldn't have wanted to do any of the acting stuff if I was a student. I hated doing anything like that. But I know in my class, Mrs. Flitton's class, I have a lot of students who like to do the vignettes. They like to do the acting stuff. They always have lots of volunteers for those. So if you enjoy doing that, definitely read through this, act out the section, okay? So you're basically acting out that scene. So the instructions are here, and then you'll have a couple characters. So you can be the director, and then there's going to be a nun and Esperanza. Or, I mean, you could be the director and Esperanza, and then just have somebody else play the nun part. So these are just things to think about if you're playing those characters. And same over here with the director, and then if you have an audience, this is what they should be thinking, okay? So if you want to do that, you definitely can, but you know, I'm not going to act this out by myself for you, but you can if you'd like to, for sure. But I'm going to turn the page and continue on. Okay, so I'm on page 72. Writing. So we're still thinking about that vignette one, the house on Mango Street, and especially that part, the scene with the nun. So just that section. It says, you are now going to write an opinion statement. So opinion, remember, you're telling somebody what you think about something. So it's I feel, I think statements. Writing an opinion means you state your opinion in an answer to a question. Then use evidence from the text to back up that opinion. So you can't just say, like, if the question was, what's the best animal? You can't just say, well, obviously cats are the best animal, and leave it at that, right? You need to back up your answer with evidence and proof and like reasons why you think that. So we have to do the same thing here. But this is the question we're answering. In bold, how did Esperanza's mood change throughout the scene with the nun? Okay, so how did her mood change before she was talking to the nun, and then after when the nun was like judging where she lived, how did her mood change? Okay, and then you'll have to tell me evidence why you think that. So it gives us a helpful hint. You may wish to start your sentence with the following. So it gives us a sentence starter right here. I think Esperanza's mood went from blank to blank in this scene. And then you would have reasons why you think that. Okay, so for example, you might say, and this is not what you want to write, okay? This example does not match the scene at all. I think Esperanza's mood went from miserable to ecstatic. So miserable, very, very unhappy. Ecstatic, very, very happy. I think that because in the third paragraph she said, I'm jumping up and down and grinning. And you only do that when you're very happy or ecstatic. So obviously this example has nothing to do with that scene. Okay, just an example of the starter sentence they used, or that they encourage you to use. And I think that because, so your evidence afterwards. So as you write your opinion, think about the following questions. Are there any clues in the text about how Esperanza felt before the nun arrived? And 2, do we think Esperanza felt the same after the nun's first question? Where do you live? As her second question, you live there? Remember to use quotes from the text and to explain what you think those quotes mean. So, we're starting with, I think Esperanza's mood went from blank to blank in this scene. Okay, so they give you this little tiny section, but there's this whole blank page over here on 73 also. So definitely take up more than just this. There's no way you could fit it just on page 72, but I'm going to start here. I think Esperanza's mood went from blank to, oops, I almost wrote blank, blank in this scene. Okay, so if you're not sure yet, you can leave those blanks real quick, or if you know what you want to say already, you can put them in. But since I'm out of space here on page 73, I'm going to continue and say, I think this because. I think this because dot 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 blank, right? And then I'll explain why I think her mood went from this to this. Okay, so before she's talking to the nun, how is she feeling? What's her mood like? I mean, maybe she's happy, she seems content, she's just kind of sitting out on the curb playing, maybe? So content is a good one. I mean, she doesn't seem like ecstatic, right? She's not super happy, but content. I mean, it's just like she's fine. But then her mood changes after she talks to the nun. Afterwards, she's pretty unhappy. She's feeling judged. She's depressed, maybe. She's embarrassed, ashamed. Okay, so remember some of those feelings from past lessons we talked about. How was she feeling? Okay, so however you want to write that, whatever words, whatever adjectives you think you want to put here, and then why do you think that? So use evidence from the text. Why do you think her mood changed? Or why do you think that now she's feeling ashamed? Or how do you know she's feeling ashamed now? Okay? So I'm not filling this part out, but you are. So complete the sentence starter and finish your evidence for it. Okay? You don't need to fill up this whole page, but I think at least like 2 reasons for why you think that, 2 evidence sentences would be perfect. Okay, if you want to do more, do more. So pause here, finish this part, and then continue, okay? Because there's one more thing of writing. Okay, so for the next writing, page 74, and I know there's 2 writing prompts, but they're short, so it's okay. The next writing prompt is still about the House on Mango Street chapter. You will now rewrite the scene between Esperanza and the nun, imagining that Esperanza is now called Zizi the X, and that the nun can see the real her. So remember in the second chapter, in the second vignette, Esperanza thinks that her name should really be Zizi the X, because that's the real her. That shows her personality, okay? And we really don't know a whole lot about her yet, so you'll have to imagine what you think she would act like, how she would be, okay? And we're putting that character into the scene. Instead of, embarrassed, ashamed Esperanza, we're putting Zizi the X into that scene, and you're rewriting what happens, okay? So how would Esperanza behave differently if she had the name Zizi the X, and if she were behaving like the real her? What would she say? How would the nun respond? So these are all good questions to kind of prompt you along in your writing. So if you get stuck, go back and read this section, okay, this little paragraph. Remember that details are very important when you create scenes. Think back to your description writing from lessons 1 and 2 and the feedback you received. So that was about the house and stuff. Think about how you use the feedback you received into this description. So we didn't get to do feedback because we don't have our partners with us, but that's okay. You can always look back to the text for clues about the characters and what they might have wanted to happen. So we've only read vignette 1 and vignette 2. If you want to go back and reread those first, you can, okay? There are a couple more helpful little questions over here on Notes to Student. So I encourage you to check these out, and that'll help you start your scene, okay? So you're rewriting that paragraph or those couple paragraphs, but you're doing it with not Esperanza and the nun, it's Zizi the X and the nun, okay? So Zizi the X, in my mind, is tough, and she's like punk rocker. Maybe she's got like spiky pink hair. I don't know. I'm just picturing like somebody just totally themselves, not afraid to be themselves, just isn't gonna, take any mean statements from anybody. Okay, so somebody tough, somebody cool. You might want to think about the following questions as you write. So what was Zizi the X wearing? Okay, so you can set the scene and tell us what she looks like first. Who spoke first? So in the real scene with the nun asked, "Where do you live?" Okay, so who's gonna speak first? So I told you what I thought Zizi looks like. Maybe she's got pink spiky hair, wearing a leather vest, I don't know. She can do whatever you want, whatever you're picturing, okay? Because we don't know what Zizi the X looks like. And who spoke first? So in my mind, Zizi the X is probably going to be like, "What's up, nun?" I don't know. Whatever you want her to say first, or whoever is talking first. Maybe the nun says something first and Zizi X doesn't even respond. What did they say? So what are they talking about? And how did Zizi the X feel at the end of the conversation? Because we know that Esperanza felt ashamed and embarrassed about where she lived, but how is Zizi the X gonna feel? Maybe she's the kind of person who has a lot of confidence and doesn't care about, if she lives in a place that isn't the best, because she's got a happy family and that's what matters. So those are all questions just to help you, okay? So I don't have a sentence starter for this one because you're creating the scene from your own point of view, okay? So you can be creative, be imaginative. It can be whatever you want it to be, okay? Maybe you want to start it with one sunny day, Zizi the X was sitting outside her house, okay? Or once upon a time, okay? So just use something generic like that, but then go on and tell me, what is Zizi the X wearing? Who spoke first? The nun came up. Who's doing the talking? What are they saying? How does Zizi the X feel? Okay, so reimagine the whole thing with those two characters, Zizi the X and the nun. Okay, so after that part, that's the end of that lesson. So kind of a shorter video, shorter CKLA lesson, depending on how long it takes you to think of what you want to write about here, but that's okay. So I'll see you guys next video for lesson 4. Miss you.